Welcome to the Love Intervention. I'm Pastor Evans.
I'm Mrs. Evans.
And if this is your first time with us, the Love Intervention is a Christian perspective on dating, courtship, and marriage. It's something that we started, my wife and I started about 7 years ago. It started as a discussion group of singles and married folks and married folks to discuss love in a Christian perspective. Even though what we bring is from a Christian perspective, that's not the only people that can use it. Right. So today's show, we're going to talk about what we learned from our parents, about our loving relationships, our romantic relationships, and our just relationships in general. Yeah.
Right.
But before we get into that, we want to remind you that my wife and I, even though I am a licensed counselor, my wife and I are not licensed therapists. Right? If you need more help after we have these discussions, or if you find that you need more help and more discussion from a professional, please seek that out. That all right with you? Awesome. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button at the bottom of the screen and hit the notification bell so you'll know when the next video comes out. All right, so let's get into it. So when we talk about our parents, we talk about the fact that we learn a whole lot from our parents. Those are our first teachers. And just looking at some statistics about families in America, the 2016 Census Bureau said that about 69% of families in America are two-parent families, right? However, about 31% of the total population lives in single-family homes, right? And if you look around, maybe in your neighborhood, maybe in my neighborhood, the people we grew up with, a lot of people only had one parent in the home, right? So we learn from our parents what we need to know about loving relationships, and that can become difficult if there's only one parent there to try to watch. Right? So then the statistics on marriage are startling, wife. Even though we've been together for almost 20 years, a lot of people don't make it. Right? The first marriage statistic says about 45 to 50% of first marriages fail.
Wow.
That's pretty bad. And then you think you would get it right the second time around, but you don't, because 60 to 75% of those marriages fail. And the term is third time is the charm, right? And it sounds like third time is the curse, because about 70 to 73% of those marriages fail.
Right.
So with those staggering numbers, how do we even find out what we're supposed to do in our relationships if these relationships don't work?
I don't know. I guess we'll figure it out together.
So considering these numbers, wife, do you think that these marriages and these failed marriages affect or how we act and react in our relationships?
I bet it does.
That's how you gonna do it.
So, do we believe that's true? Whether or not we first learn how to love and we learn about love from those in our families and especially our parents. I think that we do. Whether you're male or female, saved or unsaved, I think that our first experience with love and a loving relationship is our parents, and we first have that connection during the gestational period. And where we have an opportunity to bond internally with the mother, and then also bond with the father as we hear his voice. So yes, so I believe that parents teach us how to love, whether they're good parents. A lot of us experience pretty good parents. They're just trying to figure it out, because there's no book on how to be a good parent, but we try our best. But we also experience the opposite of love, or what we grow to be love, if we have parents that are not as good or bad, or deal with parenting in a negative way. And that can be from any amount of things, being neglectful or abusive, or just not around. So I do believe that. What do you believe?
I think definitely we learn how to love from our parents. Consciously or subconsciously, we see how our parents love each other, or the lack of love between our parents and those folks that live in single family houses. We see how they interact and react and love each other, and we either aspire to be like that or we don't want to be like that. And usually, the first man a woman falls in love with is his first man a woman falls in love with is her father. And she tends to, if there's a healthy relationship there, she tends to look for men like her father if that relationship was healthy. And quite frankly, sometimes if the relationship is not healthy, women, as far as I understand, tend to look for men that remind them of their fathers, which is why a lot of us end up in difficult relationships, because subconsciously we learned how to love from a person who didn't know how to show love, like you were saying.
Right.
And just like women, men look for a woman like their mom.
Right.
And either subconsciously or hopefully it's subconsciously, because consciously that would be kind of strange. Looking for a woman like his mom and wants to love the way that hopefully he saw his father love. But the numbers say that might not happen. So I think that's true too.
Yeah. So I read an article in relation to women or girls, young women, and how they learn to love. And it said that for a girl, dad is usually the man in her life for many years. How he treats her will affect her relationship with men throughout her teenage and adult life. She looks to him for affection, respect, and affirmation of her femininity. If he proves these things for her or provides these things for her, she will usually expect the same type of treatment from the males in her life later on. In other words, she isn't likely to tolerate men who behave disrespectfully or abusively towards her. If, on the other hand, she has become accustomed to living with neglect, criticism, and abuse, she may spend decades enduring the same behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what we're talking about, right?
Right.
So what you show your child as a father, and this is kind of what I think about when I hear the article and read the article along with you. As a father, it becomes extremely important for me to show my daughter how she should be loved.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't want her toiling in a relationship 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now. If you ever watch this child, you're not that old yet. 10 or 20 years from now. Because I was a horrible example.
Hopefully 20 years from now.
Hopefully 20, right? So because I was a bad example. But if we know that, though, then maybe we can make some changes. If we know that we're picking people because our example was bad, maybe we can make some changes.
Right. And I just want to say that that quote came from Focus on the Family, opposite sex parents and child relationships. And so that's where that quote came from. And then you brought up briefly, how young men or boys learn how to love. And in that same article, it said mom is usually in a better position to serve as an advisor in the matters of the heart. And that's for boys or young men. When a son is struggling with a relationship that is tying his emotions in knots, a woman's perspective can offer both insight and comfort. And I just think it's really important, especially being a mother of a young man, that we do our best to provide emotional support for our sons, so that they can, so that they know that it's okay to have or to express their emotions in a positive way that doesn't take away from their masculinity or who God has created them to be as young men and soon to be men.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important, and I watch you do that with our son, just kind of making sure that he feels love in a healthy way, and make sure that as a father too, I make sure that I'm being an example of trying to love you the right way, so that so our kids can see that, right? So, yeah, good.
So then, what does God say to parents about our first experiences with love as we are children and we continue to grow to become adults?
Chapter 11. In Deuteronomy chapter 11, verses 9, starting in verse 19, God says that you shall teach your sons, talking to them when you sit in your house, when you walk along the road, and when you lie down and when you rise up. When you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, so that the days of your sons may be multiplied on the land which the Lord swore to your fathers to give them, as long as the heavens remain above the earth. And what that says to me is that we're supposed to be talking and teaching our children at all times.
Right.
We said earlier that our children learn how to love from us, whether we know that they're learning or not.
Right.
And God is reminding us to teach. Teach. What's the word I'm looking for? God is reminding us here to teach intentionally all the time.
Right.
Making sure that His word is in your house, making sure that His word is on your hearts and on your mind at all time. Right? So we learn how to love that way from God in that way.
We have to be careful also because I know that I became an aunt very early, and with my niece, because I was an aunt very early, I wasn't careful, or we weren't careful when she was around, when we were watching particular TV shows, listening to particular movies, or having particular conversations. And although sometimes the children are not yet speaking, they're still absorbing.
Right.
And it's important that we are careful to not present them with information that will affect them later in life, because kids are sponges.
Right.
And even though they don't understand, they have the ability to understand, and they will take in that information, and it will affect them in negative ways as they grow. And so got to be careful about our TV shows and our music, and what we do in front of them, just like the word said, because we are teaching them everything we say, everything we do. And you see it all the time, right? So you see like kids in families where they do a lot of celebrating, and I like to celebrate, I like to dance, and then how it comes out is the babies dancing,
baby
grooving on the videos on YouTube, right? We've all seen the cute baby videos, but it's because they're mimicking those things that they were around, because they were being taught how to behave in groups of people, and then that's also with speech and language and words and all
relationships. So they pick all that stuff up.
Right.
And then now we're looking at our kids like, well, where did that come from?
Right.
I didn't do that. I'm not like that. But you was watching whatever you were watching. So that's very true.
We got to be careful.
Teaching them all the time. We go with that. Ephesians 6 says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. Fathers and mothers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. And if we're talking about teaching our children and what we learned from our parents, more specifically, we have to, as parents, remember that we're constantly teaching our children, like we said.
Right.
And then make sure that we're not causing them undue anguish by the things that we're doing or not doing, or by our presence or lack thereof.
Right, because we have to be careful because children are sponges, but they also react in a very I don't know the word, but they react to things because they don't have experience with them, and so they react in ways that they don't even understand because they're trying to understand based on what they're being taught. And that's why it's very important that if we want our children to grow up and be healthy, loving adults, that we do our best to show them what true love is, and have an understanding that we're teaching them all the time, and that we shouldn't do anything that would cause them to build resentment and anger. And I'm not saying like let them eat the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Discipline is important, but do things to them that that didn't necessarily have to be done according to however you choose to raise your children. like beating your children, not necessarily a good thing, because that could create anger, which it creates pain,
right,
which creates anger,
right,
which creates disobedience
right.
in their life.
Because beating is not the only form. Like, first of all, you shouldn't beat your kids, right? Whooping,
Right. I just use it as an example,
right,
though.
I know. Whooping is different from beating.
Right.
But
and there's all forms of discipline.
Right, all forms of discipline. But this last part says, bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord.
Right.
As we continue to say, we're Christians and we're trying to raise our children that way. But whatever your decision is, whatever your faith belief is, we still need to bring our children up in discipline and good teaching.
Right.
And if we don't talk to them about relationships, right, and how to love others and how to love people when they get to the age where they're having those type of relationships, it becomes difficult for them to act and react. And then as you grow, some people find themselves in relationships with people who
right, just
never had any instruction on how to do it.
Well, that's why it's important to not only show them through action, but also through your words. Because sometimes we miss it. Right. I know I do. Sometimes you miss on how to show love because you're just trying to get from A to B quickly, and kids move slow. And an important part of showing love is patience. Sometimes you don't got it. And so you, while that may have not been the best example with your actions, you can definitely go back and apologize with your words and let them understand how love works and how they should be used to receiving love.
Right. All right. Final scripture. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, teaching him to seek God's wisdom and will for his abilities and talents.
Right.
Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." So what we're going to bring out here is just as you're learning and as you're teaching your children, and remember that you're teaching your child so that they could be a productive person one day, and part of that productive personhood,
right,
being a good person,
right,
is probably going to include relating to other people,
right,
particularly people of the opposite sex.
Right.
So when we're talking about relationships and making sure that we're building and learning how to love in these relationships, we as parents have a big part in that. And if you didn't have a parent that taught you that, you might struggle.
Right. And then we also have to understand that this all plays into a greater purpose, right? And so we're talking about what God says to us about how we learn about love, and whether or not we learn our first experiences with love are from our parents and our family members. But all of that plays into who God is creating you to be, and whether or not you'll get an opportunity sooner than later to become who God is calling you to be. Because sometimes we have neglectful parents like I have, and it's taken me a little longer to get there, but I feel like I'm getting there. But if you have better parents or parents that are more locked into what they're doing as parents, you can become who God is creating you to be sooner.
Well, again, we learn a lot from our parents.
Right.
And the Love Intervention is about figuring out how to live and love in a way that's going to be meaningful and healthy for you, right? So we talked about what we learned from our parents in this episode, because sometimes we might need to go back and say, where do I learn these crazy things from? What's happening? I don't understand why I keep acting and reacting this way. I don't understand why I keep picking these type of men. I don't understand why I keep picking these type of women.
Yeah.
You might want to look at where your foundations of love lie.
You might want to look at the relationship you've had in your life with those people who were closest to you.
Right. And then once we look there, then we can move on. Next episode, we'll talk about something else. As we continue to figure out this thing called love and these things called relationships, and dating and courtship and marriage, we'll look at some other things.
Until next time.
You closing?
I thought you were done.
Huh?
I thought you were done.
You thought I was done?
Yeah,
I didn't do this part yet. Thanks for joining us here on Love Intervention. I'm Pastor Evans.
I'm Mrs. Evans.
Don't forget to like this video if you liked it. If you didn't like it anyway and share it. And don't forget to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. It's going to be somewhere on the screen. And hit the notification bell so that you can get our next video when it comes out. If you have some topics that you would like for us to discuss, you can drop them in the comments and we'll see if we can get to them.
So is this one supposed to say, until next time?
Yes.